There was a shepherd who was herding his flock in a remote pasture, and suddenly a new Jeep Cherokee advanced out of the dust, and a driver got out in a Brioni suit, Gucci shoes, Ray-Ban sunglasses, and asked the shepherd, "If I can tell you exactly how many sheep you have in your flock, will you give me one?" "Sure." The driver took out his notebook, he connected it to a cell phone data bank, NASA page, satellite GPS system, scanned the area, received the results. He said, "You have exactly 1,586 sheep." And the shepherd said, "That's right. Take one of my sheep." Man did. And now the shepherd said, "Now can I ask you something? If I can tell you exactly what your business is, will you give me my animal back?" The guy said, "Sure." He said, "You are a professional consultant." He said, "That's amazing. How did you know that?" He said, "It's easy. So you turned up here without anyone asking for you. You gave me information that I already had. And you don't know a darn thing about my business because you chose my dog." You know, in the past number of years, there have actually been no end to the articles, books, blogs, webcasts, sessions, seminars on just what is wrong with Jewish life today and what a synagogue should be and should become. And there are consultants everywhere, and everyone has an opinion. And they don't just come from traditional Jewish sources, come from newspapers and secular universities. They come from think tanks. Everybody is thinking about it. Where's the silver bullet to solve all the problems they believe endanger the Jewish people? I read them all. I do because it's my job and I need to keep up. But I have to say, I don't agree with most of the analyses. I actually support the view of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who's the retired chief rabbi of England. This is what he writes about the Jewish world today. He says the two dominant strands in the Jewish world today are fighting the battles of the past, not those of the future. They're fighting assimilation and anti-Semitism. The battle of the 21st century is the one Jews have been waiting for at least 2,000 years. What if we had a Jewish state and could do what Jews have been commanded to do since the days of Moses? Build a society based on Torah values of righteousness, justice, kindness, and compassion, the great prophetic values. What if non-Jews no longer look down on Judaism as inferior to Christianity, Islam, or Enlightenment? And what if they actually respected it as a source of wisdom and inspiration? And Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Sacks, says, these are no longer what-ifs. They are the actuality within which we live. For the first time in 4,000 years, Jews have sovereignty and independence in Israel, freedom and equality in the diaspora, and the world needs Jews, and Jews need the world. I have to say I support those views, and I try to live them, and I'm privileged to work in a synagogue where we have freedom and openness and values of which he writes. This is Kol Nidre, and I would like to share with you what I see through my eyes. I'd like to share with you what's in my heart, what I see in my experiences here. You know, in biblical days, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, used to dress all in white, go into the Holy and Holies, and become an advocate for the Jewish people, for himself, his family, and the Jewish people. He had to be a symbol of purity. He had to hope for forgiveness. He had to believe in that notion. He was an advocate before God for our people. An advocate, in this case, is someone who appreciates the beauty and unity of each individually represents and of the entire community, all of the parts. The advocate has to feel obligated to the community. You know I'm not a Kohen. I'm not a Levi. I'm certainly not a Kohen Gadol by a long shot. But I am an advocate for you, for us, for what we are becoming, what we are, and what I hope we will yet evolve into. I advocate tonight for the essence of why we need each other, why we need community, why we need a synagogue, in fact, why we need Beth Sholom, why we need this institution. Ruth Blatt in Psychology Today wrote a really interesting article. You probably, if you read it, never thought it would be quoted at the high holidays, let alone on Kol Nidre. It's called What the Rolling Stones Teach Us About Lasting Love. It's not about their music. Anyone who knows anything about the history of the Stones knows that they've had plenty of breakup fights, but they keep coming back together. And for 50 years, they have been a band, a touring, united band. Now, Mrs. Blatt points out that Keith Richards said about this phenomenon in his memoir, it's because the Stones are bigger than any of us. And then she writes, the possibility that the Rolling Stones simply made the conscious choice to stay together and then remade the choice every time their relationship was tested makes them a case study in commitment for both social working groups as well as couples. Commitment, it turns out, is more important for relationship longevity than doing or saying the right things. Commitment is more important than doing or saying the right things. According to a study of the generations of marriages in the Journal of Marriage and Family, the authors report that the most important factor in predicting whether unions last is the degree of commitment to staying together, even more than fighting. This may help explain how the Stones have been able, even though they don't seem to have exemplary relationship skills, but they are resilient as a unity. They are able to stay together. The union is bigger than any of us. It's through relationships that we find our higher selves. It's through union with others that we're able to rise to our higher angel. Sometimes the group is natural. It exists. It's part of our culture. But sometimes a group has to be created. I want to share with you a story I read from Michael Josephson about a woman named Anne. Her father is Sam Burke, and he was in the last stages of cancer. And she was forced to put him in a convalescent home. And her worst fears were realized when she met the staff. They seemed bored and burnt out. And as she drove home, she cried. She was such pain thinking about her beloved father in that place. And then she remembered something that her father had told her after she had had such a difficult first year in her dorm at college. Her father said, "Never accept the unacceptable. There is nothing that can't be made better if you put your mind to it." So Anne found out the names of all of those who could be taking care of her father, and she wrote them each individual notes. And in each note, she included pictures of her father in military uniform, of his children, of his wife, of his life. And then she wrote this note included with it. "This is my dad, Sam Burke, a good and proud man who fought for his country and worked hard for his family. I know you will treat him with kindness and dignity. I'm very grateful." Sam died a few months after that, and Anne received this card from the entire staff. "Thanks for entrusting us with your dad, Sam, and for reminding us of why we do what we do. He must have been a great father, because you sure are a great daughter." Anne created a sense of community where it had fallen apart. She helped them rise to their sense of purpose again and higher aspiration. She touched their hearts, and they touched her hearts. That's what community is. That's what we strive to do here at Temple. You know, during the High Holy Days, I mentioned during my sermons a number of books that have influenced me. The book I'm going to mention now has had the single most influence on me in quite some time. And I would recommend it to anyone. It's a massive book. For me, the most important chapter is chapter 1. It's called Far from the Tree by Andrew Solomon. Far from the Tree. It's remarkable in its scope and power. I want to share with you a few of the insights of it because it helped me understand even more the directions I need to go in and that I hope our congregation will go in. So the book, according to Andrew, and it is what it is about parents who fell in love with children they never knew they wanted. Parents who fell in love with children they never knew they wanted. There are themes in this book of generosity, acceptance, and tolerance. It is understanding how these families came to think well of their children will give us the insight to do the same, not only for our children, but for all children and all adults. Now, Mr. Solomon believes in a truth that I believe in, and that is the world is made more interesting by every sort of person in it. It doesn't seem very controversial unless you realize who were the subjects of his book. Andrew Solomon wrote the book about this, he said. Over 10 years, I interviewed over 300 families for this book. The children I describe here have horizontal conditions that are alien to their parents. Horizontal in that they are similar to each other, but alien to their parents. They are deaf, dwarfs, they have Down syndrome, autism, schizophrenia, multiple severe disabilities. They are prodigies. They are people conceived in rape or individuals, children who commit heinous crimes. They are transgender. The time-worn adage, he says, is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, meaning that a child resembles his or her parents. These children are apples that have fallen elsewhere, some a couple of orchards away, some on the other side of the world. Yet myriad families learn to not only tolerate and accept, but finally celebrate children who are not what they originally had in mind. All offspring are startling to their parents. I love that line. All offspring are startling to their parents. These most dramatic situations are merely variations on a common theme. We can understand the universal phenomenon of difference within families by looking at these extreme cases. To look deep into your child's eyes and see in him both yourself and something utterly strange, and then to develop a zealous attachment to every aspect of him, is to achieve parenthood's self-regarding yet unselfish abandon. It's astonishing how much mutuality has been realized, how frequently parents who had supposed they couldn't care for an exceptional child discover that they can. He also quotes one of these individuals who talks about rejection, what it is to feel rejection from a parent. A child may interpret even well-intentioned efforts to fix him as sinister. Jim Sinclair, an intersex autistic person, wrote, "When parents say, 'I wish my child did not have autism,' what they're really saying is, 'I wish the autistic child I have did not exist, and I had a different non-autistic child instead.'" He says to read that again. I wish my child did not exist. I wish my child did not have autism. What they're really saying is, I wish the autistic child I have did not exist, and I have a different non-autistic child instead. That is what we hear when you mourn over our existence. That is what we hear when you pray for a cure. That is what we know when you tell us of your fondest hopes and dreams, that your greatest wish is one day we will cease to be, and strangers you can love will move in behind our faces. Now, these are extreme cases, but it's true for many of us. I've taken this to try to understand what it is to truly love and celebrate difference in everyone. Not only in our children, but in our community, in our synagogue. And I do believe that the more diverse we are, the more open, the more welcome we are, the healthier that we are. And it affects us all for good. I view God as the source of life in all its variations. That is the spark in each of us, which helps make us a little lower than the angels. The more our community embraces different abilities, backgrounds, origins, familial configurations, racial histories, ethnic traditions, the stronger we are and more we reflect God. You know, there's a concept called process theology where the world is in God and God is everything in the world. God is constantly changing in this way of thinking because we are constantly changing. God is near as our breath, as our DNA. God makes us who we are, no matter who we are. We are the body of God. God is present in every decision we make. We have free will, but God is in the decision, in our diversity, in our actions. When we look in someone's eyes, we are seeing the eyes of God and the uniqueness of God. I don't know if you're aware of this, but most people think they are generous. All studies indicate when they ask people, are you kind, are you generous? They all, huge majority, something like 89%, say yes. But what we've found in studies is that people are different depending on where they are and with whom they are. Surroundings, people, other groups change the nature of who we are. We are not just one personality. Our personalities often change depending on the situation that we're in. The fact is that being here tonight, being in community, one of the best reasons for that is to help us become our higher selves, is to help us learn more how to do the right thing, how to see in each other, not difference, but uniqueness. Here you will find, I hope always, a community that accepts you and encourages you, that will love you and help you to become your best selves. Maybe if we use the modern metaphor, that the message at Temple Beth Sholom is that here you'll find a Wi-Fi connection to Judaism, which is fast, built in, across all devices, and easily accessible. Whatever works. But the truth is, that's what we are building, and that's what we need to do. I want to introduce you to someone that I met through a piece I read. His name is Cosmo Landesman. This was in the London Sun Times. I want to read to you what he wrote about himself, Cosmo Landesman. I am a bad Jew. How bad? I'm a pork-eating atheist. I did not have my children circumcised or bar mitzvahed. I've been to a synagogue only once. I married out of the faith twice. I never observed Jewish holidays or festivals. I wouldn't know the difference between Smoke Kippur and Yom Kippur. There are times when I wish I were a proper Jew. I feel as though I've been cut off from a great history of a remarkable people. I've turned my back on a sense of belonging, community, culture, tradition, and history for a deracinated secular cosmopolitanism that offers little explanation of how to live out the meaning of life. What Cosmo seeks, we have here. What Cosmo misses is waiting for him here. All he needs to do is walk through the door. God has given each of us the free will to decide. We can accept, we can join, we can become our higher selves. That is the message of Yom Kippur. There's a beautiful little book by Anne Lamott. It's called Help, Thanks, Wow. The 3 essential prayers. Help, thanks, wow. I want to tell you what she writes about wow. The third great prayer, wow, is often offered with a gasp, a sharp intake of breath, when we can't think of another way to capture the sight of shocking beauty or destruction, of a sudden unbidden insight or an unexpected flash of grace, wow means we are not dulled to wonder. We click into being fully present when we're stunned into that gasp by the sight of a birth, or the images of the World Trade Towers falling, or the experience of being in a fjord at dawn for the first time. Wow is about having one's mind blown by the mesmerizing or the miraculous, the veins in a leaf, birdsong, volcanoes, when we are stunned to a place beyond words, when an aspect of life takes us away from being able to chip away at something until it's down to a manageable size and then file it nicely away, when all we can say in response is, wow, that is a prayer. During my 28 years at Temple Beth Sholom, I've been privileged to experience the power of community, of family, of friends in the most intimate and personal way. Each year, each month, each week brings new moments of wow. This past few months, I have to say I've felt the wow of community, uniting as only human beings can do and rising to such heights. I want to share a few of those wow moments with you. I'd spoken before about Susie Strauss Jacobs, the blog she wrote when she battled cancer that took her life this year. At her funeral, the power of the community around her was palpable. The tears filled the seats to overflowing at Bethel, Temple Bethel in Boca. Susie herself recorded her own words of thanksgiving, which we heard over the speaker system as she recognized the circles of her life who had rallied around her, supported her, encouraged her, prayed for her, cared for her and her family. That is community. That is wow. That's what happens when people connect to each other. I saw this year when Wendy Landis died, Michael Rosen's sister, how she inspired people all over the country through the Wendy Walk to raise money and awareness for treating liposarcoma, a rare and as yet incurable cancer. Her family, her friends, members of her communities and congregations rallied and continue to fight, even after her death. There are only words of wow for a moment, for people like that, for community like that. And this past month, we at Temple have been stunned and drained as one of our kids, David Dubrow, who started preschool here and went through bar mitzvah, traveled to Israel, and remained close to the friends and the community he met here throughout the years, was burned in a horrific fire in Connecticut. After days of treatment, surgeries, hope, he died. His parents, Neil and Karen, his brother Roma, his grandparents, his entire family was devastated. But so were we. He's a beautiful young man at the beginning of his life. As the Russin family wrote, David was youthful, cheerful, soulful. Words just can't even describe him. His friends that he made in youth that stayed with him, Mark, Jeremy, Jake, and Sam, wrote, there are some things in life that there's no way to brace yourself for, no way to anticipate. David has been a larger-than-life presence for us for as long as we can remember, and these long days without him have been like a bad dream. All we know right now is that we have all suffered an incomprehensible loss. We love you and miss you, Dave. And Dave's parents, Neil, Karen, wrote, David was our light, our sunshine, our heart. David was an organ donor, something we did not know. It was determined after many hours of various tests that we were able to grant him his final wish to save another's life. David successfully donated his heart, liver, and a kidney before he passed. Another miracle. David and his family joined this community when David was 2 years old, and the community rose to his needs. That community remains a support and a connection to him and his family. When I met with Neil this past week, he said, Nothing prepares you for the loss of your child, but nothing prepares you for the outpouring of community after a tragedy like this. That is wow. But community is not just about death and comfort. This week, Sandy Cohen, our smiley face, our friendly face in the Holy Grounds in the Welcome Center, who serves you all those goodies that I won't mention tonight, described that this week a young mother of 2 was there, and she was teary because it was the first day of school for her little one. And they talked, and it ends up this mother is from France, and this is her first beginning here in our community, and she was nervous. So Sandy served her a little tea, and they spoke. The woman spoke about her fear of anti-Semitism in France and how wonderful it is to be in a community where you can be happy to be Jewish and open in your Jewishness. And later that same day, another woman came in, and Sandy heard that she had a French accent, and she was there for her daughter who was starting the infant care that day. And Sandy said, there's another mother here, and you two probably should get together. And they've become like the beginnings of a new little support group, a new community to help them enter our community. That too is wow. And you know that we take groups to Israel every summer in the Magical Mitzvah Tour. This summer, Cantor Haas and Rabbi Pomerantz and I were privileged to have 49 who were there when they started. Very few of them knew each other. There were very few friends on the trip. And yet this Rosh Hashanah, they came to here together for synagogue, and they went out to lunch together as a group because they bonded in such a special way. That's the magic of the Magical Mitzvah Tour, but that is the wow of what community can do, what it is to bring people together and to nurture each other. And I want to share a couple of other wows. One happens to be live streaming. We certainly have seen it during the funerals, but we also saw it on Rosh Hashanah when Marcia Green wrote me about her family's experience. Marcia wrote that her daughter Amy and husband Mark in Raleigh, North Carolina, watched, and her daughter Amanda in California watched and posted a picture of the service on her phone. Marcia wrote, "It's great that our family in 3 different states can all share the same service, and they can still feel part of what they've grown up with." To be all over and still want to touch base with your community. And I also want to mention 2 of our young people in college, Nadine Goldberg and Jason Albert. Last year at Duke, they missed the cello that we heard here because it was their tradition and they didn't have it there. So instead of just missing it, they went to the rabbi and the dean of music, and this year in their service in Duke, they had a cello. Because what was planted here grows elsewhere, because community can grow by those who care about it. And I want to share just this one last one here. One wow that Lois Kotzen, our office manager, many of you know Lois, she wrote this about Rosh Hashanah. "I sat with 2 women from my teenage years. For years, coincidentally, my mother and I sat with Linda Schrank and Bonnie Hellman, 2 sisters who were neighbors of ours in Bay Harbor. My parents were friends with their parents. Since my mom passed away, I still meet them every Rosh Hashanah and Kol Nidre and sit with them. Makes me feel good. This year, Linda Schrank asked Linda Serbin, who we also went to school with, to join us. She was having a hard time because her husband, John, is sick. She was so happy to sit with us, and at the end of services, she asked me if she could sit with me during the service the next day. Of course, I said yes, that I would save a seat for her next to me. Anyway, I had already called Doris Oleski and asked her if she needed a ride to services, and she was so happy to accept my offer. Doris and her husband, Hank, were also friends of my parents. The 3 of us, Doris, Linda, and I, sat together. And after services, Linda Serban hugged me and thanked me so much. She said that she never had to go to high holiday services by herself before, and it was wonderful to have someone to be with. As for Doris, when she got home, she thanked me a million times for picking her up and taking her home. And I said, "No, Doris, thank you. I don't have my mommy anymore, and you're the closest thing to having her at this holiday time." That is wow. That is beauty. That is prayer. And that is community. In Andrew Solomon's book, Far from the Tree, he says, to look deep into the other's eyes and see in him both yourself and something utterly strange, and then to develop a zealous attachment to every aspect of him. That is community. It is what we aspire to create here. And I want to say one other thing about community, about variety, about change. Edith Klein talked about something that happened this past summer when she spent it with a group of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer Jewish teens at a Shabbaton. This is how each teen described that setting. It was the first place I felt like I could be both queer and Jewish, like it was a normal thing. She said the teens shared a sense of wonder at how good it feels to be fully seen and understood. When you can be your full self in a community, they reflected, you do not notice that you are being welcomed and included. You simply feel that you are a part of things. True inclusion runs so deep that no one can imagine the world any other way. That's what I take from Far from the Tree. That is what we are trying to create, a place where no one can imagine the world any other way. That's what I'm trying to take in my life as well. That we can be like that for each other and for all who come here. We can be a blessing. Be here with our community. Be here for each of us. No matter how we differ from each other, we are the same. And it is God who brings us together as one community. As Charles Reznikoff, the poet, wrote, out of the strong sweetness, out of the dead body of the line of Judah, the prophecies and psalms, out of the slaves of Egypt, out of the wandering tribesmen of the deserts, and the peasants of Palestine, out of the slaves of Babylon and Rome, out of the ghettos of Spain and Portugal, Germany and Poland, the Torah and the prophecies, the Talmud and the sacred studies, the hymns and the songs of the Jews, and out of the Jewish dead of Belgium and Holland, of Romania, Hungary and Bulgaria, France and Italy and Yugoslavia, of Lithuania, Latvia, White Russia, Ukraine, of Czechoslovakia and Austria, Poland and Germany, out of the greatly wronged, a people teaching and doing justice, out of the plundered, a generous people, out of the wounded, a people of physicians, and out of those who met only hate, a people of love, a compassionate people. We are all far from the tree, and yet we are all of the tree, connected through community, through God. Or maybe, as the Rolling Stones would say, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, well, you might find you get what you need. Gemar Chatima Tova. May this be a good year.